Well, welcome everybody. Today I'm Amy Miller. I'm on the board of directors for the Women of Asphalt, and you are in for a treat today. So thank you for taking time out of your schedules today to join us. Before we get started, I just want to give you a brief intro here. You're joining today as part of our Lead and Inspire series, and you're joining Women of Asphalt. If you're new to Women of Asphalt, just know that you're joining a group of professionals dedicated to advancing and empowering women in the asphalt industry. We have nearly 3,500 members across 22 branches, spanning 28 states. We began back in 2017, and we have just a fantastic group of members and folks that care a lot about our industry, want to look for more ways to get more women in our industry, and then support the ones that are in it already. I did want to share some really exciting news with you today. We have a very important event coming up in March. We have our inaugural Women of Asphalt Day. It's going to be in conjunction with the World of Asphalt. So if you're planning on coming, or if you're not planning on coming, now's the chance for you to make plans. The Women of Asphalt Day is going to be on March 27th at the World of Asphalt event again in Nashville, Tennessee. So we're going to have a lot of industry leaders there. We're going to have experts, lots of folks there to talk about a lot of information, education that you all won't want to miss. It's going to be a fantastic event. We have a group that's working on laying out the panels and the keynote speakers and the workshops, and they're working really hard to make this first event absolutely wonderful. So please join us. I know that there are details on our website, and there'll be more details coming and how you sign up and how you get involved with that. So, so there's that. We're going to move into some housekeeping info here. So I did want to tell you that we are looking for you all to be engaged today. So a lot of times in our webinars, we'll ask folks to wait until the end of the webinar to ask questions, but we don't want you to do that for this one. As you think of things you'd like to ask Rita, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we're just going to talk about them as they come, because we want this to be a conversation. We don't want this to be a formal presentation. And you'll understand that a little better as you get to learn about Rita. So I'm going to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Rita Leahy. And Rita, I know that initially you and I had talked about you sort of taking your bio, but I know you're an humble person, and I want everyone on the call to know about all the wonderful, amazing things you've done during the course of your career. So everyone, just hang with me. Dr. Rita is a professional engineer. She was a technical consultant and former technical director for the California Asphalt Pavement Association. She's been actively involved in the transportation industry on pavement-related issues at the national, regional, and state levels for 30 years in various capacities. Project manager and principal with engineering consulting firms, associate professor of civil engineering at Oregon State University, senior staff engineer with the Strategic Highway Research Program, principal engineer with the Asphalt Institute. She's authored more than 50 publications on asphalt technology, materials characterization, and pavement design and analysis. She served as chair or member of several NCHRP panels addressing mechanical properties of hot mix asphalt and performance of warm mix asphalt. She served on the Transportation Research Board's Committee for Quality Assurance for 18 years and as chair of the committee for 6 years. While in faculty at Oregon State University, she was invited to lecture in Australia, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. In 2015, she was the keynote speaker for the Australian Asphalt Pavement Association's workshop series, which was held in the 5 mainland territories and Tasmania. She was the first woman elected to serve as the president of the Association of Asphalt Paving Technologists, AAPT, as it's affectionately called. She's a registered civil engineer in California and Texas. And there's more to add. She's directed the work of engineers, geologists, and technicians across the US, worked with lots of very well-known organizations, companies. She's frequently served as an expert witness on pavement materials, worked closely with user agencies and industry to implement new technology and concepts. You all remember SuperPave, performance-related specifications, statistically based quality control assurance systems, and design build strategies. Most recently, she served as quality management consultant to the California High-Speed Rail Authority. She earned a BA from St. Louis University, a BS and ME from the University of South Carolina, and a PhD from the University of Maryland. So don't be intimidated. You're going to see that she is as down to earth as they come and just a lovely person. So, Rita, with that, I'm going to let you
Okay,
go ahead.
Okay, the audience, what you should take from that is I'm old, not the original Asphalt woman of Asphalt, but the old woman of Asphalt. And as my husband used to say, well, clearly she can't hold a job. She's had to go all over the place. So, Amy?
And not hardly, yes. So, so Rita, just, you know, you've had such a prestigious career. So, you know, what, in terms of your bio and info, is there anything that you want to just pull from that to share with us? I think that you had originally intended on not being an engineer, right? So
Right,
you might want to talk about that.
I think I really became an engineer somewhat by accident. Back in the last millennium, many years ago, I had hoped to go to med school. I didn't get in. Affirmative action was just kicking in, and there were a lot of folks with even better grades than I had that didn't get in. So, you know, I went to work for the government, Department of Defense. My husband was active duty military. He was transferred. And so I knew I didn't want to work for the government for the rest of my life. Well, what do you want to do, honey? And I said, I don't know. I think I'll go back to school and do engineering. So we were in South Carolina. I did my bachelor's and master's. And I used to see the professors knocking off in the afternoon. They'd go watch a tennis match or a baseball game. And I thought, that's what I want to do is, you know. So we go back to the Northeast, and one of my advisors at the University of South Carolina said, well, you know, maybe you want to teach, you know, you got to do a PhD. And I thought, well, I don't even know what a PhD is, but I thought, okay, if that's what I got to do. So I go to the University of Maryland, and the National Science Foundation was very interested in increasing the number of women in academia, in science, technology, engineering, so on and so forth. So in one case, I kind of lost out on affirmative action, but now they're interested in women. And so, yeah, that's me. I can do that. So they gave me some ridiculous sum of money, and I did, you know, the PhD. So, and of course, then I had to get a job because my husband was retiring for the military. So the Asphalt Institute was right across the parking lot, and that's kind of where I began my engineering career at the Asphalt Institute. So it was, you know, it was pretty much by accident, but a wonderful accident. So,
right. We're glad your accident happened, Rita. That's for sure. So let's talk a little bit about your career. So you began working in the 70s, and I know in talking to my mom in her time working in the 70s, you know, she talks about times when she was only allowed to wear a skirt to work, and she had to wear pantyhose every day to work. Like, thank goodness that has changed. There'd be a revolt if that was still in effect, I can tell you. But so talk a little bit about your journey of your career as a female in the asphalt industry, and how it's kind of changed throughout your years of working.
Well, certainly, you know, the pantyhose, absolutely, in the meeting kind of environment, you know, it was pantyhose. There were, I don't even think there were pantsuits in those days, or that was not the uniform of the day, so to speak. So there was that aspect of it. Everybody was in more formal attire. Obviously, when you went to a construction site, blue jeans and boots. I mean, if you had a shirt with a collar, that was formal attire. there weren't any other women. And I think two things. Kind of the good thing was there was never a line in the women's bathroom. You know, I think for years I never saw another woman in the bathroom at a technical meeting. The gentlemen in the industry, I don't know, did they feel sorry for me? Did they take pity on me? Because, you know, maybe they didn't want to pick on me or, you know, give me a hard time because I was the only one. I do want to say that I was very, very fortunate that there were so many men that were so helpful, that were so encouraging, so supportive, that really reached out to me very sincerely. Now, I'm sure that many women in the industry have encountered incidents or, you know, discrimination, that sort of thing. But I got to say, I was very, very fortunate. I don't think I would have been as engaged or as successful or had as many opportunities had it not been for some incredibly generous men. Amy Epps' father, John Epps, of course, was one of my early mentors. And I know he's been certainly very helpful to his daughter, Amy. But there were a lot of folks that were very, very helpful to me.
Right. Yeah. So you don't mind sharing the bathroom these days, I'm guessing, right, Lita?
Oh, absolutely not. It's very refreshing to you know, see other women in the restroom, and so we can commiserate and, you know, maybe pick on some of the guys sometimes. So it is those friendships, those relationships are very, very helpful to, you know, have somebody else to hear what you're going through, to share those experiences, to, if you encounter an uncomfortable situation in what is still a predominantly male dominated career, you know, how do I cope with it? And, you know, you always consider the context. You know, in talking with Amy earlier, one strategy sometimes is, if somebody makes an uncomfortable remark, you know, sometimes you ignore it. Sometimes you take a deep breath and you wait until the situation is right, and then you pounce. So there's no
right.
One way to approach some of these encounters that, you know, very likely you will have. And I'm sure Amy Epps could weigh in on, you know, what she's encountered. Leslie Myers at the Federal Highway Administration, Joe Daniel in academia. So you encounter situations, comments in a whole host of niches that are included in our industry, whether it's academia, government, construction, trade associations. Those are all very different environments that you may encounter some uncomfort.
True. So talk about industry change from a technical perspective, like what you saw over the course of your career in terms of industry change, maybe sophistication of equipment or things of that sort that have changed.
Certainly much more sophisticated testing equipment in the lab and in the field, and in construction, equipment has improved, has become a whole much more sophisticated. Pavers, rollers, material transfer devices, the automated compaction equipment. There's a whole lot greater emphasis on performance rather than on some arbitrary mix design parameter. Those are, they're important, but we've just gotten a whole lot more sophisticated in terms of the testing. There's been a tremendous push or nudge to force, I don't say force, to encourage the contractors to assume a greater responsibility for quality. And of course, we define quality in a lot of different ways. There are also a lot more training opportunities for the engineers, for the technicians, social media. I mean, there weren't even cell phones many years ago. And so now you see people in the field with, all sorts of sophisticated electronic devices that do real-time measurement.
That's right.
Lots and lots of equipment related changes and perspectives with regard to defining performance and defining quality.
Yeah. So I got a private question that someone wanted me to ask you. Was there anything you'd hope you'd see change over the course of your career, but didn't necessarily see change? Like something you'd hoped for?
Wow. That's an interesting and that's a tough question.
Could be technical, it doesn't necessarily have to be, maybe it's product related.
I think maybe greater cooperation between the user agencies and the typical customer client relations. Even today, well, I haven't been involved with, intimately involved with the trade association and Caltrans, so to speak. I think if there could be greater collaboration between the industry and the typical user agency, we've made tremendous strides, absolutely, but there are still competing interests that sometimes make those conversations arriving at a solution very challenging. In fact, Russ Snyder just published a very lengthy piece in the California Trade Association magazine about quality. And we used to joke in consulting that there's good, quick, and cheap, and you only get 2 out of 3. And it's a painful acknowledgement, but there are competing interests, and it's a challenge for the competing interests to get resolved.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about under the sort of the topic of career journey. What strategies have you found effective in balancing career aspirations with personal well-being? So we talk a lot about this whole notion of work-life balance, and it isn't really even a thing. We've even done had an expert come on a couple of years ago at Women of Asphalt and did a whole webinar on it. So for you over the course,
I don't think I have.
Well,
I'm sorry, Rita, I'm putting someone on mute here. So yes, I'll turn it over to you just to give us some thoughts on what you found effective in sort of working through career aspirations and personal well-being.
First of all, to anyone in the audience that is a parent, male or female, I don't know how you do it. Working a full-time job and being a parent. My husband and I did not have any children. We didn't even have any pets. So you have my utmost respect, working full-time and trying to be a parent. You gotta carve out some time for yourself, and whether it's biking, swimming, yoga, Pilates, reading, yard work, you got to be able to carve out some time to meet your needs.
Mm-hmm.
You have to define boundaries. It's incredibly helpful if you have a supportive, significant other or spouse. Defining boundaries and finding time and taking time for yourself is, you need it for your mental health as much as you do your physical health, and you'll make a better employee if you can establish and adhere to those boundaries. I can assure you, no matter how many hours a week you work, you'll never get it all done. And I think it's important to accept that fact as part of defining boundaries between work and the rest of your life.
Exactly right. So Rita, when you were working, what did you do to sort of give yourself that downtime? Like, what did you look forward to doing?
Oh, you mean besides having a drink every day?
I guess that counts for something.
Absolutely. If I've offended anyone who doesn't partake of alcohol, I apologize, but I'm still going to drink. I did bicycling, swimming, reading, lots and lots of reading, yard work. So I mean, there were, I was the lawn boy. My husband was the landscape artist, and I was the lawn boy. So, Friday afternoons, I'd put 2 bottles of beer and a bucket of ice, and I'd go mow the lawn, and it was therapeutic. It really was. So lots of physical activity and lots of reading on all sorts of topics.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I can certainly relate to the yard work. There's something very cathartic about, in my book, about weed eating, planting, and then when you're done, seeing what you've done. And it's just kind of mindless work, but there's something to be said for it, for sure.
Amy, you've hit upon a good point. It's a little bit like the difference between engineering, design, or consulting and construction. In manual labor, you see the results of your efforts very quickly. And the yard work, the construction, you see your results, and it is very gratifying and very reassuring. And I think that's what I so enjoyed about construction is, holy smoke, we paved a mile today. You could see the results of your work. So.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to talk about something a little bit differently. What were some of the most significant challenges you encountered as a female leader in the asphalt industry, and how did you navigate and overcome those most significant challenges?
Probably the one that I encountered, but I didn't get too twisted about it, was golf. It was not uncommon, and still is very widely practiced, golf outings. I don't think the organizers were mean-spirited. I suspect they thought, she didn't want to hang around with these guys any more than she has to. I don't golf. Sometimes at professional meetings, they'd go to the veranda and smoke cigars. I don't smoke cigars. So, but there was still a feeling of, I'm not part of the group. And just recently in one of the trade magazines, I saw, after a meeting, there was this golf outing. And I looked at all the photos, and there was not one woman in the golf outing groups, in the golfing groups. And again, I don't think it's mean-spirited. I'm sure there are a lot of women in the audience that golf. But it was just not something that I wanted to do. Like I said, I didn't smoke cigars, but still it was like, oh geez, I'm kind of left out. And those social activities are where a lot of business takes place. So it's something to think about. Is it going to change much? I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what the folks in the audience do. Is this still quite common? And how do you handle that when, you know, it's a golf outing and there's 25 guys, and do you want to spend your afternoon with 25 guys? Or, you know, I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what the experience of the group has been.
Yeah, so everyone, if you have thoughts on that, please chime up in the chat box. So Connie's saying we need to learn golf. They drink and aren't that great to begin with. So there you go. And you know what? I like it, Connie. And if it's a scramble, hey, all you got to do is just, you don't have to be that good in a scramble anyway. If it's a shamble, you might have to have a little more game. But Trisha says she's been contemplating learning to play a little golf because it is such a big part of of networking in our industry. She thinks it's not mean-spirited either. I agree. Years ago, before I had children, I didn't want to be left out. And so I bought golf clubs and golf shoes and went out, and I would go on do these tournaments too. And I was terrible. But I learned there's a lot of men that are terrible, even without the alcohol. So, you know, so it's definitely, it's one of those things that I think it's up to us to, to can take the challenge and to be part of the gang. Let's see. Anna says she thinks it's not intentional, but she does often feel left out because they don't think about inviting me. So what I say is when the men have a golf tournament, the women in the organization should have a spa day, right, to counter that. And we can network together in the spa together, right? What's the difference? And then our good friend, Amy Epsmartin says, I think part of it is women don't like to spend that much time doing anything, perhaps. Kimberly says our Minnesota APA chapter has a ladies top golf outing tonight, in fact, in the Minneapolis area. She's 3 hours away, but she'd love to participate. And I'm with you, Kimberly. That's just a ton of fun to do top golf. And then Holly says, I'm also not really into golfing, and I think we need to make some kind of shift to have more inclusivity for a variety of outings and activities. Now, Stacy says she's been playing since she was a kid, but it seems that most of the men don't even consider inviting the women if we don't step up and invite ourselves, which isn't always easy. So that's a real shame. Stacy, invite yourself. I knew what you meant. She said she still stinks even with playing from childhood, but that's okay. You know how to do it. And then Connie says, I do tips, sips, and chips with other women once a month with a golf pro for fun. Hey, that sounds like a great, like, state chapter Women of Asphalt event right there. Tips, sips, and chips. So I do too. Wish we were closer, Rita. We would do that together. All right. So thank you all for that input. It was really good. So let's see here. Moving on to leadership, Rita. Throughout your career, were there mentors or supportive networks that played a crucial role in your growth?
Could you repeat that, Amy?
Sure. Throughout your career, were there mentors or supportive networks that played a crucial role in your growth?
Absolutely. When I started at the Asphalt Institute, the field engineers, and at that time there were probably 25 or 30 field engineers all over the United States. They kind of adopted me, took me under their wing, showed me the kind of not the rules of the roads of construction, but were very patient. They took me to asphalt plants. I was on the back end of a paver. I mean, they were just incredibly helpful. When I was doing my research at the Federal Highway Administration, there were engineers, there were technicians that showed me how to operate the equipment to measure this, stress and this strain. They took me into the machining lab to show me how to, they machined some of the equipment. And then one fellow in particular at the Strategic Highway Research Program, Ed Harrigan, who was at NCHRP for many years. I'm sure some people in the audience know Ed. he was the one that taught me how to do technical writing. He really, set a very high bar and worked and reworked. And so that was a part of my career that had it not been for Ed Harrigan, I would still be mumbling along. Carl Monosmith at Berkeley, Gary Hicks at Oregon State, John Epps at the University of Nevada, Reno. And there were some contemporaries, some people, believe it or not, that were, young guys. Adam Hand, who's still at University of Nevada, Reno, and he encountered him in both construction and in academia. The list could go on and on in terms of the number of people that encouraged me and supported me. I think it is not uncommon for individuals to say, well, I did it all on my own. And that, I'm sorry, but that's pure unadulterated BS. We have opportunities. I used to, when I was with the trade association, I used to drive through the Central Valley of California, and there were women on their hands and knees picking strawberries, picking lettuce, and I had to remind myself that had I been born in Mexico, that could have been me. So keep in mind that oftentimes we have opportunities that so many other people don't have. So yeah, you work hard, you have a good moral compass, but sometimes you just have opportunities that other people don't have. And so keep that in mind when you think about, how you got to where you are and where you want to go.
Yeah, I think both those are really good. When you and I were talking, I thought I was really fascinated with the names that you spouted out. You mentioned some today, but there were others you mentioned when you and I were talking. And these were folks that had been encouraging to you and mentors to you. And some of those names are still around today, and they're still encouraging others. And it really is, a good message, Rita, because you're absolutely right. We're very fortunate to get to do what we get to do. And I think we really should all take that challenge of be encouraging to other people, period, right? So we at Women of Asphalt, we have a mentorship program, and yeah, someone's just bringing it up right now. We're on the same wavelength. But we have an organized mentorship program where, a lot of it is meant to do these sort of things, to have someone that you can talk to about your career, or how personal things, or really whatever you deem appropriate between the mentor and mentee. But I think those are great. But beyond that, as people, we should use the opportunities we have to be encouraging and to help others, and to always remember, Rita, what you said, that we should be humbled by the fact that we have opportunities that others will never get to have, for sure.
Ask questions. People love to talk about themselves and their work. So if you demonstrate interest in hearing from someone who's, in the industry, ask questions. It's okay to say, I don't know. That's really important. Being able to say, I don't know, because if you know where to get the answer, you know who to go to get that question addressed. I think that ensures your credibility. The worst thing that you can do is be in a technical audience. Somebody asks you a question and you're like, holy smoke, Batman, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to try to BS my way through it.
Right.
I guarantee you, there's someone in the audience that knows the
answer.
And if you try that approach, your credibility's gone. Yeah. So I don't know is perfectly okay.
Absolutely. We have a question for you, Rita. What's the best advice to give to the younger generation that, looking back, you would have given yourself? That's a good question, by the way.
listen. I would have learned to be a much more patient and perceptive listener. And I don't know where I read this, but it was very concise. Listening is the ultimate form of respect. I do remember my 6th grade nun saying, Rita, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should be listening twice as much as you talk. And, it took me, even though the way I'm babbling now, you wouldn't be so certain that I adhere to that advice, but listening, it takes a great deal of restraint, but listen, patient and perceptively.
Yeah. I just want to add a few comments on the side. Connie says, don't be so thin-skinned, is what she sees in the field. Women are afraid to speak up when men are present. Ladies, don't let men intimidate you, speak up. And then Amy Epps Martin adds, and Rita is a great mentor who changed my life. And so, yes, I know that you and Amy Epps Martin have become great friends over the years, and she's told me to as well. She and I were on a panel recently, and something came up about a mentor in the asphalt industry, and she mentioned you, and I mentioned you as someone that I certainly model after. We haven't even had the chance to talk about all the fantastic things that you've done post asphalt, but anyway,
it's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yes. And we did have a good conversation about Rita-isms. There are quite a few of those, and they're really good. So maybe we can mention a few of those before it's over with. All right. So next question, how can aspiring women professionals in the asphalt industry seek out similar support systems? So I'll say we're on a Women of Asphalt call, so there's an obvious one right there.
Join trade associations, join professional organizations. You've got social media now. I gotta believe that there's all sorts of social media sites. I mean, I don't do social media, but there's all sorts of different avenues to reach out, to connect to people. So reach out to the people in your industry. Learn about the equipment. Don't be reluctant to push yourself out there, so to speak. As I say, there are trade associations, there are technical associations, volunteer, the Transportation Research Board, the American Society of Civil Engineers, equipment manufacturers. You want to try to touch every part of the industry, whether it's equipment or testing labs or construction management. There are so many ways to connect to people and say, I'm new to the industry. I would like to learn, what it is you do and how it connects to the other pieces of the industry.
Absolutely. In terms of specific leadership qualities that have attributed to your success, what are those, and how would you advise aspiring leaders to develop these qualities?
I made some notes here because as a senior citizen, I'm somewhat forgetful. So I talked about being a patient and perceptive listener. Having the self-confidence, in industry as you evolve into a leader, to tell me something I don't want to hear. Be willing to take more than your share of the blame and less than your fair share of the credit. Encouraging the people that work below you to blossom, to flourish. You want somebody that's, not necessarily younger, but maybe in employer-employee relationship. You really want them to want your job, because that person is going to work very hard to demonstrate his or her capabilities. So you want somebody that wants your job. And it takes a big person, a confident person, a nurturing person, to give that person the opportunity to shine. Show me the money, show me your stuff, and not be threatened by it.
Absolutely.
Let's see, what else? Be task oriented, particularly in our field, tasks, scope, budget, schedules, be very clear and very concise what your expectations are, whether it's for a project or whether it's in a performance review. Tell people what you expect, so there's no mystery, there's no moving target for that person, again, whether it's project related or individual performance related. And I can't recall who had shared this with me. I'm sure it was one of my many mentors. Do not confuse motion with action. Do not confuse activity with productivity. So those things marinate a little bit. People do lots of paper shuffling and then there's nothing at the end. So understand what expectations are, and be productive, not just active.
Oh, those are really good.
Yeah.
You've given Amy F. Smartin and I some more Rita-isms to record. So that's good. All right, for women aiming to excel in the asphalt industry, how have you seen your leadership positively influence workplace dynamics and foster a more diverse and inclusive environment?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion are, also, the one of the many buzzwords. I think what has happened is that all across the workplace, people realize that you cannot ignore 50% of the population and expect to advance and be productive. And that may be an oversimplification, but I think in all areas of the workplace, people are realizing that 50% of the population, you just can't. And I have read now where more women are finishing college than men. More than 50% of graduating law school, graduates from law school are women. The number of women in medicine is, 40, 50%. So I think there's a realization that, we are a force to be dealt with, and we're very productive.
For sure. I'm going to go back to a comment that I thought was good, and it goes back to what you talked about before about accepting blame and not always being the first to accept credit. So we did have Kimberly who said, good point about accepting blame without always seeking to accept credit. Admitting when I make a mistake has been liberating, even if I was afraid that it was a terrible one worthy of losing my job. So I think that's really great. I mean, if you can work in an environment, you feel like you are comfortable enough to admit your mistake. I mean, I think that's part of it too, is like the culture of the company that you're in should readily accept when people want to admit to their mistakes, right? That's how we get better. And being able to admit that, I made a mistake is, I think, is a very, it's an humbling characteristic to have. But I think it's also one that folks can certainly appreciate, right? So thank you for that, Kimberly. I think you're right on with that. All right, so we're going to go on to some really more inspirational type stuff as we're coming up here on our last 14 minutes. So Rita, what words of encouragement and empowerment do you have for the female audience members who are eager to make their mark in the asphalt industry drawing inspiration from your remarkable journey.
Holy smoke. You're going to have to work harder than I think than the average fellow. And I would like to ask any of the audience that are in academia if what I observed in academia and in the workforce, if things have changed dramatically. When I taught at the University of Maryland, Oregon State University in civil engineering, there was the normal bell-shaped distribution for the guys. I mean, there were good, bad, a lot of average. The women were either really good or they were really bad because their dad told them to do this or their uncle told them to do this. You got to go in engineering. They were good or they were bad. And I don't mean that from a moral perspective, but academically speaking, they were, like I said, really good or really bad. In the workforce, you got to be better than average to be judged average. And again, I'm not penalizing or trashing the people that are making these judgments, but you're going to have to work harder and be better than the average Joe. So I would ask Amy Epps, who's been at Texas A&M for 20, 25 years, Amy, what has your experience been with the women that you've encountered in the classroom?
We're going to put her on the
26.
spot.
Answer's 26, but yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. It's the same.
Okay, so Amy's data are more current than mine. You're going to have to work harder, and you got to be better than average. And that may be discouraging, but you got to understand what the context is and what the challenges are. So,
yep.
Good luck, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Yeah. And so I'll read a couple. Let's see if we've got a comment here. I found that my female student colleagues are less likely to assume they will succeed if they are average with the material and leave the field, while men will figure average is good enough. Sorry, that's great, Crystal. But it goes back to what we've heard before on our calls, and this just sort of it's not going to sound stereotypical, but I've seen it myself where men will look at a job application and they'll say, well, I can do like 25% of that, so that I'm definitely applying for this job. Ladies will look at the job application and say, I can do 90 to 95% of this, but there's a little bit I'm questioning. I'm probably not the right fit for this job, right? So it kind of goes to what you're saying, Rita, like we have to, excuse me, I'm getting a reminder here for my next meeting. Yeah, so better than average, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's part of the nature, the nurture, but women are much more likely to demonstrate self-confidence, and so you might call that hubris on the gender side. I don't even know if I can say, I don't want to get in the binary and all that kind of
right
continuum. I got a gay nephew. He's married to his husband. I don't have any problem with that. You just, maybe it's as little boys, they're taught a little bit differently or encouraged to do more things than little girls. And in any event, I think it's real that women are not inherently as self-confident or as inherently willing to speak to that self-confidence as men traditionally are.
All right. Well, this is a good one to sort of end here on. So Amy F. Smartin
Yes,
says
before we
this.
get arrested or thrown in jail.
Amy F. Smartin says, this reminds me of the Ritaism about interrupting your intelligence with my confidence or expertise. So do tell the Ritaism in your words.
I'm sorry, was that a question to me or to
So
Amy?
no, this is Amy making a statement. She
Oh.
says that this conversation reminds her of the Ritaism about interrupting your intelligence with my confidence. And she says she's not sure if it's intelligence or expertise, but one of the two. So you'll know the official words that you use for this particular Ritaism.
I read the New Yorker religiously, and there are always some wonderful cartoons in there that I've been known to share with some of my women compatriots.
So that's it. All right. So we're just gonna we're at the end of our questions here. We've got about 8 minutes left. So we've got Rita on the line here. If anyone wants to ask her anything, you know, one of the things that Rita does, which I think is just so amazing in her post Asphalt life, is lots of biking. And you know, most recently, Rita, why don't you just share with them what you share with me, which I thought was so amazing, in your trip across the pond and how your one particular day ended. And I think folks would like to hear that.
Most recently, I bicycled with a friend. Well, we did London to Paris, and we took the ferry from the United Kingdom to Cherbourg, France, and we went to all the D-Day beaches. And you know, for some of the younger generation, they may not be all that familiar with the D-Day beaches, but they're on the Normandy coast. And the American Cemetery at Omaha Beach, you know, they were retiring the colors and playing taps, and you know, I just cried like a baby. It was a very, very powerful moment, realizing how many young men had given their lives, you know, to help end the Second World War. And we finally got to Paris. I was on a Sunday, and I've never been so terrified in my life of being on a bicycle. And there were, I mean, defined bicycle lanes and young people with kids on the back of their bicycles. And I was like, is this child abuse? Is this neglect that there's all these cars whizzing by? And in any event, I've done lots of long distance self-supported bicycling. It's been very therapeutic. It's been as good for my head as it has been for my body. So if bicycling is in your future, enjoy. It's really, really helpful.
It wasn't long ago you did Route 66, right?
Right, from California to Chicago. My brother and sister, and as well as some friends, thought I was nuts, but it was a tremendous sense of accomplishment.
Absolutely.
And it was an adventure. It wasn't fun. It was an adventure. Fun is something that you do over and over again. I'm not going to do that again.
That's awesome. All right. Let's see. Let's looking here. Any further questions or any comments for Rita you want to share before we go today? I'll just share a quick story from Kimberly. She says, I was able to tour an offshore sulfur drilling rig in the Gulf in the early 80s. There was only one woman. She said there was only one woman on board. It was a petroleum engineer. Her room was the only one with a curtain. God love her. She got the curtain.
Mm-hmm. Good for her.
Yes.
That would be
all right.
Kind of scary.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. That's a little hardcore. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being on today. We appreciate you. Rita, thank you so much for taking away some time out of your busy retirement schedule. You are a busy lady, and we always love talking to you and hearing from you. And from everyone else, thanks for all you do in your jobs. And again, please remember our Women of Asphalt Day coming up in March at World of Asphalt. You can find out more on our website. Hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and we hope to see you soon somewhere. All right, take care, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.